Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. The budget session of Parliament concluded on Thursday, a day ahead of schedule, with both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha adjourned sine die. Held in two parts, the budget session had begun on 31st of January with the address of President Ram Nath Kovind to the joint sitting of both the houses. It was followed by the presentation of the Union Budget by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on the 1st of February. The first part of the budget session concluded on 11th February when Parliament went into recess to examine the budget papers, and the second part resumed on 14th March and concluded on the 7th of April, a day ahead of schedule, after completion of the budgetary process as well as passage of several key bills. The total productivity of the 8th session of the 17th Lok Sabha was 129%, while the upper house recorded productivity of about 99.8% during the budget session. In 27 sittings each, the Lok Sabha passed 12 bills, while the Rajya Sabha passed 11 bills, including 6 appropriation bills and finance bills that were returned. So in Perspective today, we will talk about some of the important bills that have been cleared by Parliament during its just concluded session, also some other issues of public as well as national importance that were discussed in both houses. And for this, I'm joined by a distinguished panel of experts on the program. So let me first introduce them to you. With me in the studio is Mr. Sandeep Phukun. He's a senior journalist working with The Hindu. And joining us virtually are three members of Parliament. I have with me Mr. Syed Zafar Islam, member of the Rajya Sabha, where he represents the BJP. Dr. Amar Patnaik, member of Parliament of the Rajya Sabha, he represents the BJD. And Mr. Hasnain Masoodi, his member of Parliament Lok Sabha, he represents the Jammu and Kashmir National Conference Party. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program today on Sansad TV. Mr. Islam, let me begin the program today with you. It's been a remarkable budget session for the ruling party. 129% productivity in the Lok Sabha, nearly 100% in Rajya Sabha, and where your party has also crossed the landmark 100 members for the first time since 1988. So what are your thoughts on the just concluded session, Mr. Islam?
Well, both Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha have been extremely productive. But in terms of productivity in Rajya Sabha compared to Lok Sabha is less, and primarily because some of the opposition parties who needed to behave responsibly in the House, but they didn't behave the way they are expected to behave by the people of this great country. Unfortunately, they wasted the productive hours. They made the deputy chairman or the chairman of the House to adjourn the Houses because they were disrupting the parliamentary procedures, and they were not letting the business to be conducted and concluded in the House. But away from that, still the productivity level is excellent. 99 point, almost 100%. Could have been better. We are happy that we could pass some of the important legislation which needed to pass in this session, where a lot of discussion, debate did happen. And I'm sure that some of the political party, particularly I'm talking about the Congress party, which is the principal opposition party in the parliament, and in both the houses, they should have at least behaved responsibly. And they needed to understand there is a sense of responsibility they should have had, because there is a level of expectation from the people of this great country from them. Then they needed to understand that they are not wasting time and the productive hours, because at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money which has to be spent for running the houses, both the houses, and everybody needs to be sensitive. And every legislation passed, it improves the life of the common man on the street.
Absolutely. So we'll talk about what are the key legislations that have been passed during this session in both houses, and I'll come back to you and understand more on this. But let me go across to Dr. Patnaik for the moment and understand his thoughts. Dr. Patnaik, how do you look back at the budget session? The Rajya Sabha has seen nearly 100%, just missed out by about, say, 10 minutes or so from this landmark achievement.
Yeah, I think had the session continued for probably 15 minutes today, but for the disturbance that was unexpected from the opposition, we could have probably reached that 100% mark, which was originally planned before declaring the adjourning the House sine die. But I must say, in all these adjournments, there was a responsible decision taken by the opposition in extending the debate hours for legislation. And therefore, we have been able to reach this figure of 99.8%. And I think that should be the spirit, though I do not support in any way members coming to the well of the House, creating disruption, because the houses are meant for debate and discussion. But I still feel that if there is some occasion in which this has been done, it should be made up in the interest of citizens of this country who have sent them to the legislature by sitting for longer hours, skipping the lunch hours as was done in the Rajya Sabha, and also, if required, sitting on even, I would go to the extent of sitting on even a weekend, because I think ultimately the people's concerns and people's issues have to be raised.
Yes.
And one feels very sorry, particularly for a regional party like mine, when the 0 hour gets washed out, when the question hour gets suspended, because these are members' hours, these are members' times, and this is the only opportunity when we get to raise questions to the ministers, government, and get an answer for our constituencies, for our state. And this should be respected by the national parties on both the sides.
Certainly. Mr. Masoodi, so this particular session, considered to be one of the longest through the year, has been quite productive. If you look at the total productivity, both in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, has been quite satisfactory from the government's point of view. If I may ask you, what would be some of the key takeaways for you from this just concluded session? What would it be?
First, it was undoubtedly productive. And let me tell you that everybody behaved responsibly. I mean, there were no disruptions at all. I mean, rarely opposition came to the well of the House, and every minute was used, fruitfully used, so that to, focus on what is expected of Parliament. So we did have a good discussion on budget. As you know, that budget is not merely a statement of accounts. It just maps out your dreams. It maps out the schemes, maps out plans for the country for the entire year and maybe some long term. So it was wonderful to participate in that, to hear the Finance Minister. And then on legislative side, also that we had very important bills. We had a bill on inclusion of one more segment of the society in tribal, in the order, including to get entitled to the benefits that are meant for the tribals. And we had Delhi Municipal Corporation, that act, which were both the bills, that as well as identification of prisoners. That was piloted by the Home Minister, and he detailed and he took House in the Congress, and he just tried to dispel whatever doubts were expressed by the push. But everybody was given a fair opportunity to articulate his viewpoint. So I would definitely like that some of this, just like allocations in agriculture, in environment, had more time was devoted to it, it attracted more attention. But taking an overall view of this session, it was one of the most important sessions in last, maybe you said that 20 years or 10 years, this session.
Absolutely. It's been very productive, Mr.
On legislature, and now every member got a fair opportunity to give voice to the back home, what were the issues back home in their respective constituencies, or even overall, which touched every soul in the country. Maybe price rise, maybe some challenges in healthcare. So it was, by any standard, it was the best session I have attended during the last 3 years.
Okay, very great to hear that, meaningful discussions were held, members cutting across party lines, agreeing that this was a very, very productive session. It reflects the high number of productivity, in fact, the high percent of productivity in both houses, Mr. Fukan. But these were the gains. There have been debates on a lot of issues of public importance. But if we could also ask about some of the misses in the wake of high price rise, inflation, issues that directly affect the common man, what would be the misses according to you?
Absolutely. I think Mr. Masoodi just mentioned some of the points that he would have liked to discuss. I mean, there's no denying the fact this has been one of the best sessions. Well, partly because the opposition, I wouldn't say they're out, but they're certainly down. Given the fact that BJP won 4, assembly elections, that also created a momentum for the government, and took away a lot of opposition sheen, as it were. So obviously, I mean, if the results were different, then probably we would have seen a more aggressive opposition. But that apart, I think even Rajya Sabha, it's been a wonderful session. Just 10 more minutes and they would have achieved 10%. But I think 100%, sorry. So they just fell short by 10 minutes. But I think the more important point, I would imagine that somehow the Treasury and the opposition benches should have come to an agreement to have a separate discussion on the issue of fuel price hike and price rise. This was in principle agreed upon in the Business Advisory Committee of the Lok Sabha. To my understanding, the government had agreed subject to availability of the Finance Minister. Of course, during the discussion on Ukraine, Petroleum Minister Mr. Hardeep Puri, who was one of the ministers involved in the evacuation effort from Ukraine, he did mention that how, if you compare the global rise in oil prices with other countries like Germany, UK, they have seen a much higher or larger increase in petroleum products compared with India. But having said that, I think for an average common man to see petrol and diesel prices go up by 10 rupees in about 2 weeks, it is a cause of concern, because with diesel prices going up, obviously it will have a spiraling effect on general inflation, on general price rise. And I wish the opposition and the Treasury benches had found a way out to discuss, because it's when you discuss and debate, a lot of valuable suggestions may have been put across, and which the government of the day can sort of ponder upon. And
absolutely.
Maybe
so let me take that point to Mr. Zafar Islam and try and understand from him. Mr. Islam, the opposition's charge also has been that you ended the session a day ahead of schedule, but you ran away from important debates on price rise, on inflation, and as Mr. Fukan rightly said, 10 rupees increase in prices of petrol in just about 2 weeks. So it's very significant for the common man that the parliament, their elected representatives, discuss these issues in the parliament. So why did a discussion, separate discussion on these issues which directly affect the common man did not take place when both houses were adjourned a day ahead of schedule?
Well, see, a lot of discussion did take place. It is unfair to say that the discussion has not taken place. The discussion did take place, and it is the Business Advisory Committee which discusses the issue, and that is being represented by all the members from all the political parties. Not only the Bharatiya Janata Party is being represented in the Business Advisory Committee. It is all the parties, but you have to understand, if the party and the opposition was supportive, they were supportive in Lok Sabha, the productivity level is 120%. In Rajya Sabha, as long as they were supportive, the productivity level is almost 100%. Had they been a little bit more supportive and they didn't disrupt, they could have asked, they could have discussed in the Business Advisory Committee, and this discussion could have taken place. All the debates have been in the past have taken place primarily because it was discussed in the Business Advisory Committee. And if the BSc, the representative would have discussed, debated, and agreed, and there was a mutual agreement that they needed to discuss on certain issues, we are not shying away from discussing anything. If we can discuss in Lok Sabha, why can't we not discuss in Rajya Sabha? If we can discuss from any platform, why can't we discuss the floor of the parliament, which is the platform to discuss everything? But it had to be discussed in the Business Advisory Committee, and there has to be agreement. And whatever had been the agreement that in terms of the business to be conducted in the House, that has been the priority of the chairman, and that is something which has been conducted by the chairman. It is the opposition parties, some of the opposition parties. I won't say Biju Janata Dal, but there are certain political parties who just believe in disrupting the parliament, and the images of when they are disrupting the parliament should travel across the country, because they feel that it can be put politically suit them, and this is what they want to do instead of conducting the business.
Okay, Dr. Patnaik, would you like to respond that these were issues that could have discussed but were largely not given as much time because the opposition, the other parties wanted a separate discussion on these issues. Some amount of discussion did take place when the finance bills were discussed, the appropriation bills were discussed. But considering that the matter is directly concerning the common man, it should have been discussed separately, which could not, for which the time could not be given.
Yeah, see, it is not just some amount of time in the finance account, discussion on the finance account and the appropriation accounts. In fact, on the general discussion on the budget in the first half, if you see two key issues which are discussed by everyone across the board were two, that is unemployment and inflation, price rise. And then this was followed through in the discussions on the appropriation bill and discussions on the finance account. So I don't think there is insufficient amount of discussion that has taken place. But I think that the response to the questions which the Honorable Minister Hardeep Puri answered on two occasions, I remember in Rajya Sabha, laid out also quite clearly the reasons for price rise and particularly the POL, the oil price, and why it is happening. But I do also admit that the entire ecosystem of how the deregulation of prices, oil prices has taken place, how the market has been deregulated, the oil companies, important companies, they decide the prices, and also how it is affecting the import bill, how it is affecting the GDP, how it is affecting, or how the oil pool bond, which was floated earlier, and how the government has to retire those things. This the discussion entirety could have actually happened had there been a short duration discussion, even for half an hour on this issue.
Certainly,
and
some clarity.
And linked to that was also, of course, the educational rehabilitation of the Ukrainian returnee students. So I had given a short duration notice for that. So these two issues, I think, could have been debated more, and I still feel that the entire ecosystem discussion can still take place even the next session. But it is important that the people of this country should know how this oil price increases are taking place. Currently, it is not known to them in entirety. It's only remaining as within the esoteric circle of a few members of parliament who know about this.
Certainly. And I think clarity needed for the common man to understand why, when the prices of crude are going down, the prices of petroleum products in our country are going up. So perhaps a short duration discussion, as Dr. Patnaik says, would have been really helpful. Okay, moving to the legislative agenda, Mr. Fukun. Some very, very important bills were also passed during this session in both houses. Some, even though sailed through both houses, are quite contentious. So if you could take us and our viewers through some of these important bills, what are the changes that they aim to bring about?
Yeah, so I think the two very important bills that stand out, one, of course, is the Criminal Procedure Identification Bill. That has been extensively debated. Of course, many in the opposition parties wanted the bill to be sent to a select committee or a standing committee because they had apprehensions that, there were certain provisions. Of course, the government has clarified that, anybody who's charged with an offense that attracts less than 7 years, or women, they don't have to mandatorily give their body samples. And the government has also argued that this is a much needed reform in the criminal justice system because, when the law was enacted in 1920, at that point of time, you did not have the biometrics, you did not have other kinds of technology which are available today. But having said that, the opposition says that, it could be a violation of, does it violate the right to privacy as enunciated by the Supreme Court judgment in Justice Puttaswamy's case? That's one aspect. Second is that there are certain provisions which, according to some members in the opposition, are grey areas in law. For example, if you are in a preventive detention. So, you're not charged with an offense, but does it give the police overriding powers? In fact, we have a judge here in the panel.
Yes,
you can ask Mr. Masoodi more on that. But, does it give the police unbridled power to, take body samples? Because the idiom in criminal jurisprudence is that you are innocent until proven guilty. So, until I am proven guilty, what are you taking my samples for? So that's one. And quickly, let me tell you, the other very important bill was, of course, the reunification of the Municipal Corporation of Delhi. That is also contentious because not too long ago, we were believing that, very soon there will be MCD elections. But
in fact, the ruling party had begun to prepare as well.
Exactly. In fact, they charged that, just an hour short of the official announcement of the polling dates, the centre had a rethink and pulled back those announcements, and then eventually this bill came. But I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I heard the reply of the Home Minister in both the houses, and the way he argued that in terms of streamlining expenses, in terms of streamlining, you have multiple authorities, same city. In any case, in Delhi, we have, you have the Delhi government, you have the central government, so you have now different MCDs, then you have Cantonment Board, you have NDMC. So I mean, personally speaking, I would say that it's a welcome step to reunify. After all, I mean, I'm of course an outsider to Delhi. I came some 25 years ago from Assam, but I remember then it was one MCD, right? I mean, and now it became 3. And after it got this bifurcation, you've seen so many problems of salaries not being paid, staff, saying that we will not work unless we get our salaries. So I think these were important issues that may have propelled the centre to take this stand. But of course, if you are a supporter of the ruling party in Delhi, that is Aam Aadmi Party, they will have a different take. They will, of course, say that, this has been done.
So very quickly, let me bring in Mr. Masoodi into the discussion. You've spoken about 2 bills. Mr. Masoodi, the Criminal Procedure Identification Bill, there were several concerns raised by opposition parties in the House, in both houses that we saw. But later on, even though the Home Minister accepted that some of these concerns are valid, he quelled all of these concerns. The kind of argument that he gave sounded very convincing, at least to some members. But let me talk from your point of view. There are also concerns now that even though the bill has been passed, it may not be able to withstand judicial scrutiny. As a former judge, what's your opinion?
Let me tell you first. Mr. Fokun rightly pointed out that price rise deserved a discussion, at least a short discussion. He is right, because all this rise in fuel price is a post-election Assembly 5 state election development, and it deserves some kind of attention, some kind of discussion. Second is that both the bills raise important constitutional questions. First is this right to unify or otherwise unification. This belonged essentially, because earlier an amendment was made by the Delhi Assembly only. So we were making use of an extraordinary provision, a proviso to go for the new legislative adventure to unify the 3 municipalities. So this again is important. And second is that the second bill again raises an important question. First is testimonial compulsions. You can go it may border on that. Second is that the privacy, it will be unbridled powers, unregulated powers. There is a likelihood of, if not in all probability, but when there is a possibility of mischief, then it is better to give a thorough discussion, discuss the matter, and the right course to send it to the select committee, because we know select committee is called a mini parliament. They have the members have a fair opportunity to discuss all the aspects. We have to remember that in our country, constitution is sovereign, not the parliament. And we have to, every bill, every act has to be touched at the touchstone of the constitution. So there are important constitutional issues involved in both the bills. In the first bill, the federalism, does it offend the federal structure? Does it ethos of the constitution, the morality of the constitution, ethics of the constitution? I think Mr. Fokun has given the right analysis of whatever the issues involved. And the second bill also, it borders on, as I said, that it is again is an important question. But Home Minister, as usual, sounds convincing to most of the people, because he presents his case in support of the bill in such a way that people, at least
And I think the manner in which he's assured that all safeguards, all necessary safeguards will be provided, there will be the right checks and balances. So, I mean, he's sort of tried to quell those concerns. But nevertheless, I'm running out of time. Let me take a quick question from Mr. Islam. This session, as we've all discussed, has been quite productive. Very meaningful debates have been seen on issues of public and as well as national importance. There have been very, very confident and, forthright comments, remarks from the External Affairs Minister as well regarding the Ukraine evacuation, regarding India's stand, the current foreign policy that we are following. But the challenge going forth will now be to maintain this productivity. The chairman of Rajya Sabha today, in fact, he could not present his closing remarks, but in his remarks, he did mention that this should be the way forward. We should be able to target 100% productivity in all of the upcoming sessions as well, because this year is very important. It's the 75th year of our independence, and we have to set a benchmark. So how will the BJP prepare for the upcoming sessions to maintain this productivity, to maintain this kind of performance in the coming sessions as well?
So we are very confident that in terms of productivity, we will certainly maintain the kind of productivity we have demonstrated in this session, and probably we will exceed the expectation of everyone. But we cannot do in isolation. We need support and more than support from the opposition parties, because it is the House which is being run with the support of opposition and with the initiative of the ruling party. So it's a collective effort, and everyone has to deliver to what is the expectation out of them. Away from that, definitely the best way to deliver it, that whatever be the issue, it needs to be discussed, whether it's a short duration discussion, whether it's any particular agenda they want to discuss, any business they want to discuss in the House, on the floor of the Parliament, then they need it to be discussed in Business Advisory Committee. Then there must be some agreement. There has to be some middle ground for everyone to accept and agree on certain issues. And then once you agree on in the Business Advisory Committee, then there should not be any disruption in the Parliament. But
absolutely,
as I said earlier, there are political parties who will agree everything in the Business Advisory Committee, but when they will get a command, an instruction from their higher authorities and for their Supremo, then they will definitely not let the business be conducted. They will not let the Parliament to be run.
But it's very important for every elected representative to understand that discussions and deliberations are the right way and not disruptions, as Mr. Islam has been pointing out. So let's see going forth whether this kind of performance, this kind of productivity that we have seen during the just concluded budget session is able to be continued as well, whether the members are accountable to their elected representatives or not. Because in the last few sessions, what we have seen is, in fact, we have been debating on our channel as well, the repeated disruptions, the pandemonium that prevailed in the House, and it sort of raised a question mark on the credibility of the institution. So now the responsibility is on all of these elected representatives to ensure, to uphold the institution of Parliament and the credibility of Parliament before all of the people of this country. So with that, I'll have to wrap up the discussion today. Thank you once again to all the members of Parliament and to Mr. Phukun for joining us on the program today, sharing your thoughts, your perspective with us and our viewers. It was a pleasure having all of you on the program today. So that's it from us on this edition of Perspective today. Thanks very much to all our viewers as well for your time. See you again next time. Thank you.